Perhaps sleep has been slow to find you tonight. The room is dark, the house is quiet, and still your thoughts keep turning, going over the day, going over the years, refusing to lie down when you do. If that is where you are right now, you are not alone, and there is grace enough for the thoughts that keep circling tonight. Some nights simply need a gentle voice and an old story to lean against, the way a tired traveler leans against a wall still warm from the sun. So tonight, let the story hold you. It is one of the oldest and most beloved stories ever told. The story of a shepherd boy from the hills of Bethlehem. A boy who sang to his sheep under these same stars and grew, slowly and by many quiet turnings, into a king. His name was David, and from his first night in the pasture to his last evening in Jerusalem, his whole life was carried in the hands of God. We do not need to follow every word. Nothing here will startle you, and nothing will be asked of you. Let your body sink a little deeper into the bed. Let your shoulders soften. Breathe in slowly and let the breath go. And with it, let go of everything the day left behind. If sleep comes for you in the middle of a sentence, then let it come and rest well, for the story will keep watch over you until morning. For now, come with me. We will walk down a long slope of soft grass under a deep blue sky filled with stars toward the night fields of Bethlehem, where a lantern glows beside a stone sheepfold and a young shepherd is watching over his flock. The road out of Bethlehem soon gives way to grass, and the grass rolls on in slow dark waves under a sky crowded with stars. Out here, the night is not empty. It is full of small and gentle things, the smell of dew beginning, the far cry of a night bird, the soft stirring of a flock settling for sleep. On one of these hillsides stands a sheepfold, its stone walls stacked by patient hands, and from a wooden post beside the gate hangs a single lantern, one warm gold light resting quietly against all that deep blue. Let your eyes rest on that little flame for a while. Everything in this story begins in its glow. A boy keeps watch here. His name is David, and he is the youngest of the 8 sons of Jesse, the one still counted a child when his brothers are counted men. While they sit at the table in town, he is given the sheep and the long nights and the wide sky, and he does not seem to mind. He has a shepherd's staff worn smooth by his own hands, a sling at his belt, a small harp laid across his knees, and a watchfire burning low and orange beside him. The sheep know his voice. He knows every lamb by name. Which one wanders, which one limps, which one presses close when the wind turns cold. And there is a quiet competence in him, the unhurried skill of someone who has done a humble thing faithfully for a long time. When the flock has settled and the fire has softened to embers, the boy takes up the harp. The notes drift out over the fold, unhurried, one and then another, and the sheep seem to breathe more slowly for the sound of them. He sings to no audience but the stars, and to the God he is certain is listening. Out here, night after night, a song is quietly being born in him, a song the whole world will one day carry, though he does not know that yet. It rises out of these very pastures, out of the still pools where he waters the flock, and the green slopes where he lets them rest. And the psalm remembers it this way: The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. What David does for the sheep, he has come to understand. God is always doing for him, and the thought settles him the way the lantern settles the dark. There were harder nights, of course, even here. Once a lion came, and another time a bear, drawn toward the flock in the dark. But those dangers came and were met and passed, because the Lord was with him, and the boy did not lose a single lamb. He never told the story loudly afterward. He simply banked the fire, counted the flock, and went on watching. For that is what shepherds do, and the fields returned to their peace, as though nothing had ever troubled them at all. Then one quiet day, down the road into Bethlehem, came an old man leaning in his years, the prophet Samuel, carrying a hollowed horn filled with oil. God had sent him and had told him only this much, that among the sons of Jesse he would find the one whom God had chosen to be king. The elders of the town trembled a little at his coming, as people do when heaven draws near. But Samuel spoke peace to them, and a sacrifice was prepared, and Jesse brought his sons to stand before the prophet. The elders came first, tall and strong and fine to look upon, so kingly in his bearing that Samuel thought, surely this must be the one. But heaven saw otherwise, and the old words say, But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Let that sentence rest on you for a moment, the way it has rested on weary hearts for thousands of years. God is not measuring what everyone else measures. God is looking at the heart, and the heart is something even the smallest and most overlooked person can offer whole. So the second son passed before Samuel, and the answer was no, gently. And then the third, and the answer was no again, until 7 sons of Jesse had stood before the prophet, each one grown and capable and pleasing to the eye. And for each one the answer was the same, soft no. Samuel stood wondering in the lamplight of that house, certain that God had sent him here, and certain too that the chosen one had not yet come through the door. And the old story tells what happened next in words worth hearing, just as they were written. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. Out in the fields, the boy would have heard his name called across the grass, and handed the flock to another for an hour, and come walking in from the dark with the smell of wool and night air still upon him. Scripture remembers his arrival tenderly. and he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he, the youngest, the keeper of sheep, the one nobody thought to call in from the pasture. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. The oil ran down, the brothers watched in silence, and heaven quietly set its seal upon a shepherd boy. And then, wonderfully, nothing happened. No trumpet sounded, no throne appeared. The prophet went home, the household returned to its evening, and David went back out to the sheep, back to the stone fold and the wooden post and the warm gold lantern, as though the greatest secret in the land were not now resting inside his chest. Perhaps that is one of the kindest lessons of this whole story, and one worth falling asleep on. God's promises can rest quietly in a person for years. They do not need to be rushed or announced or proven by morning. They keep the way embers keep through the night, warm under the ash, waiting for their appointed day. So the fields outside Bethlehem lie at peace again. The watchfire has burned down to a soft red glow. The lantern sways just slightly on its post, and the sheep sleep close together in their fold, safe within the stone. The boy leans back against the wall with the harp quiet in his lap, anointed and unhurried, keeping watch beneath the same stars that keep watch over you. And over boy and flock and hillside alike, the Lord who sees the heart is watching too, all through the night, and nothing in his keeping is ever lost. You can rest now. The shepherd is awake, and the night is in good hands. And that is enough for tonight. The hills around Bethlehem had settled back into their old rhythm, and so had the boy. The oil of anointing had dried on his hair. The great prophet had gone his way, and David returned to the sheep as though nothing had changed, though everything had. He still counted the flock at dusk. He still sang his small songs to the wide night sky. And you can rest in that picture a moment. The chosen one, content to be hidden, in no hurry at all, because God is never in a hurry with the ones he loves. But some miles to the north, in the town of Gibeah, there stood another kind of dwelling, the tall house of Saul the king. It was a house of stone and cedar, of guards at the doors and lamps in the corridors, and yet for all its strength, it had become a heavy place. For the king himself was troubled. A shadow had settled over his mind, the kind of shadow that does not answer to argument, and it made the whole house walk softly. We should speak of Saul gently, for he was a man to be pitied more than feared. He had been given a crown, and somewhere along the way he had let go of the hand that gave it, and now a restless, sorrowful spirit visited him in the long hours. Sleep would not stay with him. Counsel could not reach him. His servants brought food he did not taste, and words he did not hear, and they stood at the edges of the room, wishing they knew how to comfort their king. It was one of these servants, some thoughtful soul whose name we are never told, who remembered something. Perhaps he had traveled through Bethlehem once. Perhaps he had heard a rumor of a shepherd who could make a harp sound like running water. However it came to him, he spoke up quietly, and his few words would change the story of a nation. The servants had already agreed among themselves that music might soothe what medicine could not. And when the king consented to hear of a harper, this man was ready. And the old record says, "Then answered one of the servants and said, 'Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and a mighty valiant man, and a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, and the Lord is with him.'" What a recommendation for a shepherd boy. And notice the last thing said of him, and the truest thing, that the Lord was with him. All the other gifts flowed out of that one. So messengers went down the road to Bethlehem, and Jesse sent his younger son to the king with simple gifts from the farm loaded on a donkey. David came walking into that great stone house with his harp under his arm, still smelling of the fields of sun and wool and open air. The guards looked at him and saw only a boy. Heaven looked at him and saw a shepherd sent to tend a suffering man. And then came a night, as such nights came, when the darkness pressed hard upon the king. The lamps seemed to give less light than they should. Saul sat with his head in his hands, and the whole house held its breath. Then the boy took his place on a low stool near the wall, lifted the harp against his shoulder, and let his fingers find the strings, the same fingers that had calmed frightened lambs in the dark. The old book tells what happened in a single, merciful sentence, saying, "And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him." Refreshed, well, the shadow lifted from the room like morning mist off a field, and the king breathed slow and deep for the first time in many days. Stay with that picture a while, because it is worth keeping. No sermon was preached in that room. No argument was won. There was only a boy with gentle hands, drawing quiet notes out of wood and string, one after another, unhurried, and God riding on that music the way light rides on the surface of still water. The harp did not heal the king. The Lord healed him, and the harp was simply the door he chose to walk through. And here is the comfort for you, resting in your own dark room tonight. The same God who eased a troubled king through the hands of a shepherd is not far from you now. He does not always come with answers. Sometimes he comes the way music comes, softly, underneath your thinking, loosening what was clenched. So let your shoulders sink into the bed. Let your breath grow long and easy. The heaviness you carried today does not have to be carried through the night. David served faithfully in that hard house. It could not have been easy for a boy raised under open skies to live within stone walls, among the moods of a wounded king, and the whisperings of a court. Yet he learned there. He learned how kings speak and how servants listen, how honor is shown and how patience is kept. Lessons he would need in years he could not yet imagine. And through it all, he kept his shepherd's heart, that simple, watchful tenderness the pastures had grown in him. For David did not stay at the palace always. He went back and forth from the king's house to his father's flocks and home again, trading the smell of lamp oil for the smell of grass. Perhaps that going and coming was itself a mercy, keeping him humble, keeping him quiet inside, so that the boy who played before a king could still lie on a hillside and watch the stars come out over Bethlehem. And on the good nights in Gibeah, the nights when the music had done its gentle work, the last note of the harp would hang in the air a long moment, trembling, golden, and then fade into silence. The king would be sleeping at last. The servants would put out the lamps one by one and slip away to their own rest, and the whole house would lie quiet under the night sky, everyone breathing easier, everything held until morning, when the music ended and the king's house had settled into its evening hush. David would slip away home to Bethlehem, back to the sheep and the hills he knew best. He moved between two worlds in those years, the palace and the pasture, and he carried the pasture with him wherever he went. That is worth holding on to as you lie here in the dark. The quiet places where we learn to trust God are never wasted places. They are the deep roots that hold a tree steady long before any wind arrives. In time, a wind did arrive, though it did not come to David first. It gathered in a valley called Elah, a wide green fold of land between two hills, with a little brook running along the bottom of it. On one hill camped the army of Israel. On the other hill camped the army of the Philistines. And between them, in the low ground where the brook whispered over its stones, there walked a giant. He was a man of the city of Gath, taller than any man Israel had ever seen, dressed in heavy brass that caught the morning sun. Twice a day, he came down into the valley, and his voice rolled across the water and up the hillsides, calling for one man of Israel to come down and settle the matter alone. We will not stand long beside that voice tonight, and we will not repeat his words. It is enough to say that the voice was loud and the heart behind it was proud, and that for 40 days, morning and evening, it filled the valley, and no one in Israel was willing to answer it. Even the soldiers who had fought many battles felt their courage grow thin. Fear is like that. It repeats itself morning and evening until a whole camp of strong men slowly forgets whose army they are. Far away in Bethlehem, an old father was thinking of his sons, for the 3 eldest had followed King Saul to the battle line. So Jesse called for his youngest and gave him a gentle errand, loaves of bread and cheeses, food for his brothers and a gift for their captain, and asked him to bring back word that all was well. And David rose early in the morning, left the sheep in the care of a keeper, and walked the long dusty road to the valley of Elah, with supper on his shoulder. He arrived as the armies were standing in their long, quiet lines, and he found his brothers and greeted them. And while he stood talking with them, the giant came down into the low ground as he always did, and the great voice filled the valley once more. All around David, men drew back up the slope, but David did not draw back. He stood and listened, and something in him grew very still and very sure, the stillness of a boy who had spent 1,000 dark nights in the fields learning that God keeps what is his. The soldiers heard how big the giant was. David heard only that a man was speaking against the armies of the living God, and he could not understand why anyone whose God was so great should be afraid of anything so small. Word of the shepherd boy's calm traveled up the hill to the tent of the king, and Saul sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul looked at him a long while, and his heart was heavy, for what he saw before him was a boy, and what waited in the valley was a man of war who had carried his weapons since his youth. But David was not offering the king a courage he had invented that morning. He was simply remembering. He told Saul in his quiet way about the nights in the wilderness when a lion had come and taken a lamb from the flock, and about the bear that had come another night, and how he had gone out after them and rescued the lamb, because the flock was his to keep, and God was there to help him keep it. David said, moreover, "The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said unto David, "Go, and the Lord be with thee." Then the king did the kindest thing he knew to do. He dressed the boy in his own armor, a helmet of brass upon his head, and a coat of mail upon his shoulders, and girded his own sword at his side. David stood under all that borrowed weight for a moment, and then, gently, he took it off. He had not proved these things, he said. He would go as himself, as the shepherd God had been shaping all along. He took his staff in his hand, and the simple leather sling he had carried through so many quiet nights, and he walked down the slope alone. At the bottom of the valley ran the brook, and here, if you like, you may rest with him a while. The water was cool and clear, moving slowly over its bed, making the soft, unhurried sound that running water has made since the beginning of the world. David knelt beside it and let his hand trail in the current, and from the stream bed he chose 5 smooth stones, one and then another and then another, each one rounded and polished by years and years of patient water. Nothing hurried had made those stones smooth. Only time and gentleness and the steady passing of the stream. He turned them over in his palm, felt their cool weight, and laid them in his shepherd's bag. So much of what God prepares, he prepares slowly, in secret, under the surface of ordinary days. Then David stood and crossed the brook and went to meet the giant. The big man looked down at the boy with the staff and laughed at him and spoke proudly against him. But the words fell around David like rain off a roof. Then said David to the Philistine, "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied." His voice did not need to rise. He was only saying what the dark fields had taught him, and he finished the thought as calmly as it had begun. "And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." And then it was over, almost before it had begun. David put his hand in his bag, and the sling turned once in the evening air, and the stone flew, and the giant fell, and the valley went quiet. That is all, and that is enough. The army on the far hill turned away and was gone, and the men of Israel came down the slope in wonder, and the boy stood by the brook in the settling dust and the silence, breathing slowly, knowing exactly whose victory it was. So let the valley rest now, and let yourself rest with it. Whatever giant waits in your own tomorrow, whatever voice has been calling out its worries to you morning and evening, it is smaller than the God who watches over you tonight. The battle was never yours to win by strength, and it is not yours to carry to bed. David laid his 5 smooth stones in his bag and trusted, and you may lay your burdens down the same way, one and then another and then another, into hands that have been keeping the flock all along. The house is quiet, the lamp is low. Sleep now, and let God keep what is his. The valley grew quiet behind him, and evening came down over the land like a blanket drawn up over a sleeping child. The shepherd boy who had walked out to meet a giant with a sling and a few smooth stones did not go home to the sheepfolds of Bethlehem, not to stay. From that day the king kept him near, and the boy who had sung to his sheep beneath the open stars now carried his harp through the halls of a royal house and slept beneath a roof of cedar. Everything in his life was changing, gently and all at once, the way a season turns while no one is watching, and you may let it turn now, slowly, as your own breathing slows. And it was there, in the king's house, that God gave David one of the kindest gifts a life can hold. The king had a son named Jonathan, a prince and a brave soldier, the natural heir to everything his father possessed. By every earthly reckoning, Jonathan should have looked at this shining young shepherd and felt the cold touch of rivalry, for the honor that should have gathered around a king's son was gathering quietly around David instead. But Jonathan's heart had no room in it for envy. The book of Samuel tells it in words so tender they still glow after all these centuries. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Knit, the old words say, the way a weaver draws 2 threads together until they are one cloth, and no eye can find the seam. Jonathan did not wait to be asked, and he did not measure what the friendship might cost him. He took off his own princely robe and laid it on the shepherd's shoulders. He gave David his garments and his sword and his bow and his belt, the very tokens of his rank and his future, handed over freely with both hands open. He had every reason in the world to hold something back, and he held nothing back. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord, a promise of faithfulness that would outlast everything the coming years would bring. And there was not one thread of rivalry in it, only love, the kind of love that is glad when the other is blessed. So David stayed in the king's service for good. Whatever task was set before him, he did it well, and he did it humbly. And the soldiers loved him, and the servants loved him, and the people of the land began to speak his name with warmth. Scripture gathers all those growing years into one calm sentence, and you can rest inside it the way you rest inside your own blankets tonight. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. That was the secret underneath it all, quieter than any victory. The Lord was with him, in the palace as surely as in the pasture. And the Lord did not look away. But not every heart in that house was at rest. When David came home from the field, the women of the towns came out singing, and their songs praised the young shepherd even above the king. Saul heard those songs, and something in him flinched. He was a tall man and a troubled one, and his fear of losing what he had slowly curdled into envy, so that the king's moods darkened like weather, a low cloud settling over the whole house. There was even a day when his anger flashed out at David across the room and then passed. Let us be gentle with Saul as we remember him, for he was not a monster, only a frightened man who forgot to bring his fear to God. And fear that is never laid down grows heavy, and the heavy hearts cast long shadows. Perhaps you have known a season like that in someone you loved or in yourself, and if so, you may simply let it be tonight in the mercy of God. In time, it became clear to Jonathan, most painfully of all, that David could not safely remain. So the two friends made a plan, quiet as a whisper, out in an open field at the edge of the town. Jonathan would learn his father's mind, and then he would come out to the field as if to practice with his bow, and the arrows he shot would carry the answer. On the appointed morning, the field lay still under a pale sky, and Jonathan shot his arrows far, and by that sign, David knew that the shadow was real and that he must go. When the errand boy had gathered the arrows and gone back to the city, David rose from his hiding place, and the two friends met one last time in the open, with no one to see them but God. They bowed, and they embraced, and they wept together, two young men who had done nothing wrong and still had to part. And Jonathan, faithful Jonathan, found the words that would carry his friend through all the wandering years ahead. And Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever.'" And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. No bitterness, no blame, only a blessing and a promise laid up in the keeping of the Lord, where nothing entrusted is ever lost. Some friendships are simply that, a shelter God builds around a hard season. They do not remove the trouble, but they make the trouble bearable. One faithful soul standing beside another, saying without words, "You will not walk through this alone." Perhaps as you lie here in the dark, a face or two comes quietly to mind, the Jonathans of your own life, the ones who loved you with nothing to gain, who gave freely when they might have withheld. You do not need to do anything with the memory. Just let your heart say thank you softly to the God who knit those souls to yours, and let the gratitude settle over you like warmth from a small lamp. And David walked out into the wilderness night. The city lights fell away behind him, and the great dark hills opened before him, and somewhere among the rocks a cave waited, where a little oil lamp could burn low against the blue darkness. He carried no army and almost nothing in his hands, yet he did not walk alone, for the Lord who had been with him in the pasture and in the palace went with him now into the wild places, step after step under the ancient stars. And that same keeping presence is here in this room tonight, near you in the dark, unhurried and kind. So let your eyes be heavy. The story will still be here. Rest now and sleep in peace. So David walked on into the wilderness night, and the wilderness, for all its emptiness, did not swallow him. The same God who had found him among the sheep went with him among the stones. Behind him lay the court and its bright rooms, the jealousy of a troubled king, the honor that had turned to danger. Ahead of him lay open country under the stars, and silence and time. You might think of him now not as a man running, but as a man being kept, the way a shepherd moves a lamb from a troubled pasture to a quieter one. That is how heaven saw it, and that is how you may see it tonight, from your own quiet bed. These became the hidden years of David's life. He was already anointed. The oil had already run down his hair in his father's house, and yet another man wore the crown. God's chosen king slept in caves and hollows of rock, while the palace lamps burned far away. It would be easy to call those years lost years. They were not lost. They were the years in which the Psalms were born. Nearly everything David would ever give the world of comfort, the songs that have sat beside countless sick beds and dark bedrooms down all the generations, he learned in the wilderness, in the waiting, in the low and quiet places. The crown could wait, the songs could not. There is a cave in the low hills of Judah called Adullam, a wide, cool mouth in the rock, and for a season it became the nearest thing David had to a home. The old record tells it simply. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. Think of that for a moment. His own family, who had once overlooked him, now came down through the hills to find him. And they were not the only ones. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him. And he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. About 400 men, and not one of them impressive. The worried came, and the weary. Men who owed more than they could ever pay. Men whose hearts had gone quietly sour with disappointment. One by one they found their way through the dark to a cave, and inside it they found a shepherd who knew what it was to be overlooked and misunderstood, and still held by God. He did not turn them away. He became their shelter, and under his care, the broken ones slowly became a family. Perhaps you have come to this story tonight, much the way they came to that cave, carrying a worry or a debt or a tiredness you cannot quite name. You are welcome here. This cave has room. There is a lamp lit just inside, and there is rest. And it was in the dark of a cave, hidden away from every eye, that David learned his deepest song. Out of that low place a psalm rises, a song the old heading says was made when he fled and hid himself in the cave. Listen to how softly it begins. Be merciful unto me, O God, be merciful unto me, for my soul trusteth in thee. Yea, in the shadow of thy wings will I make my refuge, until these calamities be overpast. In the shadow of thy wings. He is sitting deep in the shadow of a rock, and he calls it the shadow of God's wings, as though the whole cave were one great wing folded over him, the way a mother bird covers her young through the night, until these calamities be overpast, not fought, not forced, simply outlasted, the way you outlast a storm by staying under shelter and letting it pass over you until morning comes. There were nights in those years when even David's brave heart went dim, and he did not hide it from God. Another song from the cave keeps his honest prayer for us. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then thou knewest my path. In the way wherein I walked, have they privily laid a snare for me? Then thou knewest my path. When David could not see the way ahead, God could. When the road was hidden from him, it was never hidden from heaven. And so, in that same song, his prayer settles into one of the simplest confessions ever whispered in the dark. I cried unto thee, O Lord. I said, Thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. The cave was not his refuge, though the cave was kind. God was his refuge. God was his portion, his share, his enough, in years when he owned almost nothing else at all. Years afterward, when David looked back over that whole hidden season, he did not remember it as a time of being hunted. He remembered it as a long rescue. This is what he testified. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. From all my fears. Not from some of them, but from all. And then, as though turning gently toward everyone who would ever read his songs in a hard season, he added this: The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. Nigh is an old word for near. near to the ones whose hearts have been broken. That is where God chooses to stand, close beside the ones who ache, closer in the low places than anywhere else. So the cave was not the end of David's story, and your waiting season is not the end of yours. The low places, it turns out, are where God comes nearest. The palace years would arrive in their own time, but David never wrote from the throne the way he wrote from the cave. Something about the dark and the stone and the daily need taught him a nearness that comfort alone never could. If your life holds a cave of its own just now, a season of hiddenness, of waiting, of being set aside while others seem to wear the crown, you may rest tonight knowing that such seasons are safe in the same hands. Nothing in you is being wasted. Somewhere in the dark, quietly, a song is being written in you too. And now, let the picture settle as sleep draws near. The mouth of the Cave of Adullam stands open to the night. A small oil lamp glows just inside on the rock floor, one warm gold breath of light against all that deep blue darkness. The 400 are asleep at last, breathing slow and even. Men who came in distress and are learning night by night how to rest. And near the entrance sits David, his cloak drawn around his shoulders, watching the faint stars beyond the rim of the rock. Not as a man afraid of the dark, but as a man kept within it. The God who was near him in the sheepfold and near him in the valley is near him in the cave and is near you now in your own quiet room. Let your breathing grow slow like theirs. You are sheltered. You are watched over. You are kept. The stars were still keeping their quiet watch when David turned at last from the mouth of the cave. The little oil lamp on the rock floor had burned low and steady, and its gold light lay soft upon the stone, and the breathing of his men rose and fell in the darkness behind him like a slow tide. He was a hunted man, and yet in that hour he was not afraid. Perhaps you know something of that yourself. There is a strange calm that comes when the heart stops running, even before the trouble itself has gone away. For Saul still searched for him. Word would drift in from a shepherd here, a kinsman there, that the king had gone out once more with 3,000 chosen men, moving through the wilderness of En-gedi, up among the rocks of the wild goats, where only the sure-footed climb. But in those high desert places, the pursuit felt far away, like thunder on the other side of the hills. The days were bright and slow. The nights were deep and blue, and David waited and watered his men at the hidden springs and learned, little by little, the long patience of the wild. Then one day came a providence so strange that no one could have planned it. David and his men were resting far back in a great cave, in the cool shadow where daylight never reaches, when a figure darkened the entrance, sandaled feet upon the stone, a royal robe brushing the rock. It was the king himself, alone, come in out of the heat to rest a while, never dreaming who lay hidden in the deeper darkness behind him. David's men could hardly breathe for wonder. They pressed close and whispered that this surely was the day the Lord had spoken of, the day when his enemy would be given into his hand to do with as he pleased. Here was the man who had thrown the spear at him. Here was the man who had driven him from his home, from his wife, from his dearest friend. One quiet stroke, they said, and all the running would be over. And David rose and crept forward through the shadows, soft as a shadow himself. He came so near that he could hear the king's tired breathing. He reached out his hand, and all he did, all he would allow himself to do, was to cut away gently the corner of Saul's robe, a little piece of cloth, nothing more. Yet even that small thing troubled him. His heart smote him for it, the old story says, and maybe you understand that too. The tender conscience that aches over something no one else would ever count. He slipped back to his men with the scrap of cloth in his hand and told them in a whisper that they would do this man no harm, for he was the Lord's anointed, set apart by God himself, and whatever wrong Saul had done, it was not theirs to answer with a blade. So the hands were held back, and the king rose and walked out into the sunlight and never knew. But David could not let him go in silence. When Saul was well away down along the canyon, David came out and stood at the mouth of the cave and called after him and bowed himself low and lifted up the corner of the robe for the king to see. Then he spoke across the still desert air, gently, the way you speak to someone you once loved and still grieve for. Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord had delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave, and some bade me kill thee. But mine eye spared thee, and I said, I will not put forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. There was no bitterness in the words, only sorrow and a clean conscience, and a trust lifted upward like a lamp raised in the dark. David would not take the judgment into his own hands. He laid it, whole and heavy, into greater hands than his. The Lord judge between me and thee, and the Lord avenge me of thee. But mine hand shall not be upon thee. And from across the canyon came the sound of the king weeping. For a moment the hard years fell away, and Saul called David his son, and confessed that David had repaid his evil with kindness. And then he turned and went home. The wilderness grew quiet again, and the evening came down blue and gentle over the rocks. You might think that settled it forever, but fearful hearts forget. And there came another season when Saul went out to seek him once more. And one deep night, while the whole camp of the king lay fast asleep, sleep having fallen on every soldier there, David and one companion walked softly down among the sleeping men, all the way to where Saul lay, his spear standing in the ground beside his head, a jar of water near it. His companion whispered that one quiet thrust would end it all. And once again, David said no. Once again, the hand was held back, the blade lowered, the moment given over to God. They took only the spear and the jar of water and climbed away in the dark. And in the morning, David called from a far hilltop, and showed what he had taken and gave it back and said, "The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered thee into my hand today. But I would not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed." Twice the chance had come, twice mercy had answered. And somewhere in those long wilderness years, David learned the quiet song he would one day leave behind for all of us who lie awake. "Truly my soul waiteth upon God. From him cometh my salvation. Not from a sword, not from a swift and clever revenge. From him, only from him." Maybe there's something unresolved in your own life tonight. Someone who wronged you and never made it right. Some old ache that still argues its case when the lights go out. You do not have to settle it tonight. You do not have to carry it another mile. The same faithful hands that held David's cause can hold yours while you sleep. Vengeance laid down is a weight laid down. Judgment handed over is a burden handed over. And a heart that forgives, or even simply waits, breathes easier in the dark and sleeps softer. So let it rest where David let it rest. Out in the wilderness, the night was still. The lamp glowed small and warm at the mouth of the cave. And in two camps, far apart among the silent rocks, the hunter and the hunted both lay sleeping under the very same stars, kept, both of them, by one patient, watching God. The two camps slept, and the watching God did not. That is where we left the story. And that is where every night of waiting truly rests, in the keeping of the one who neither slumbers nor grows weary. Seasons turned over the wilderness the way blankets turn over a sleeper. David grew older in the hiding places, and the promise made in Bethlehem, the quiet oil on a boy's head, lay in God's hand, like a seed lying all winter in the dark ground, not forgotten, only waiting for its appointed spring. And then, in God's own time, the long waiting ended the way God's promises always end, not with hurry, but with fulfillment. Word came down from the mountains of Gilboa, carried by a weary runner, that Saul the king and Jonathan his son had fallen, and David tore his clothes and wept until evening, and wrote a song of sorrow for the king who had hunted him, and for the friend who had loved him better than a brother. There was no gladness in him at the news, no secret relief, only grief, for David had never learned to hate the man who hated him, and love keeps no ledger of wrongs. You may rest in that tonight. The heart God shapes for himself is a heart that mourns gently even for its enemies. When the days of mourning had passed, David asked the Lord where he should go. For even now he would not reach for the crown with his own hands. "Go up to Hebron," came the answer. And so he went, with his household and his faithful men, up into the hill country of Judah, where the air is thin and the evenings come blue and early. And there, at last, the elders of the tribe came to him, slowly, with dignity, in the way of old men, and they anointed David king. The oil that had touched a shepherd boy's hair so many years before now ran again, and this time there was a throne beneath the promise. The old record keeps it in one plain and peaceful line. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. Think of that as you drift, dear listener. A boy anointed in his father's house, a man crowned in Hebron, and between the two, years upon years of caves and kindness and patience. Every one of them counted, not one of them wasted. In time, all the tribes of Israel came to Hebron as well, and made David king over the whole land. And he looked north to a stubborn hill fortress that no tribe had ever taken, a stronghold set on the ridges like a stone crown of its own. David took that hill and made it his home, and it came to be called the City of David, the city we know as Jerusalem. He built and settled and gathered, and the scroll says of those years, something so simple that a child could carry it to sleep. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. That was the whole secret, and it still is. Not the walls, not the armies, not the crown, only this, that the Lord was with him. And the Lord is with you, here, in this dark and quiet room, just the same. Then came a day of homecoming, gentle and golden. The ark of the Lord, that old chest of covenant wood and gold that had traveled with Israel since the wilderness years, was brought up to the new city. And David, who was now a king, was not too much of a king to rejoice at the sight of it. He laid aside his royal robes and wore a simple linen garment, like a servant of the sanctuary. And the scripture tells it with a smile in its voice. And David danced before the Lord with all his might. And David was girded with a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. Hear that gladness softly, the way you might hear a festival from far across a valley at dusk. The trumpet mellowed by distance. The shouting turned to a warm murmur on the evening wind. It was joy, real joy, but let it come to you like warm light through a window, not like noise. The king danced because the presence of God had come home, and heaven did not frown at his dancing, for God has never been ashamed of the happiness of his children. Out of all those years, the caves and the crown together, David could sing what he had learned, and one of his psalms gathers it up the way a lamp gathers light. For his anger endureth but a moment, in his favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. He had wept through many nights, that shepherd king, and he had lived to see the morning after every one of them. And in the same psalm, he lifts his eyes and speaks to God as to a friend who has kept every promise. Thou hast turned for me my mourning into dancing. Thou hast put off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness, to the end that my glory may sing praise to thee and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give thanks unto thee forever. Rest with that a while. Between the anointing in Bethlehem and the crown in Hebron lay long years of waiting, and not one of them was wasted. The cave taught him mercy, the wilderness taught him trust, the sorrow taught him songs. If you are in a long wait of your own tonight, a prayer not yet answered, a hope deferred so long you hardly dare to hold it, know that your years are held the same way David's were, counted and kept, every one of them doing quiet work you cannot see. Weeping may endure for a night, but the night is not forever, and this one, even now, is nearly over. So picture the city as it settles into sleep. The ark rests in its tent upon the hill. The lamps go out one by one in the small stone houses. The streets grow still, and a late watchman walks his slow round under the stars. In an upper chamber, a candle has burned low beside an open scroll, and near it, on the rough wood of the table, lies a simple crown, set down for the night, glowing faintly gold in the last of the flame. It is not a trophy, it is a promise kept. The boy from the sheepfold sleeps a king tonight, because God said he would, and God does not forget. Let your own breathing slow now. The God who kept David through every waiting year is keeping you. Morning is coming, gentle and sure, and there is nothing you need to do tonight but sleep in the favor that is life. All is well, all is quiet. Rest. The city sleeps below the king's window now, and the watchfires along the walls have settled into a low amber glow. And here, in the quiet chamber, the crown still rests on the rough wooden table where he set it down, beside an open scroll, in the small, warm light of a single candle. David is home. The walls have gone quiet along the borders, the gates are shut and guarded, and the house of cedar stands solid and fragrant around him. Beams of Lebanon overhead, smooth floors underfoot. For the first time in many long years, the shepherd who became a king has room to breathe. And you may know from your own life how it is in such hours when the striving finally stops, that the deepest thoughts of the heart rise slowly to the surface, like stars coming out one by one. One evening, in that settled peace, David sits with the prophet Nathan, and the candlelight moves gently over the cedar walls, and the king says what has been troubling him. He lives behind walls of cedar in comfort and honor, while the ark of God still rests in a tent behind curtains, the way it has since the wilderness. It does not seem right to him. He wants to build God a house, a temple of stone and gold, something worthy, something lasting. It is a good desire, born of a grateful heart, and Nathan hears the goodness in it and tells the king to go and do all that is in his heart, for the Lord is surely with him. But that night, while the palace sleeps, the word of the Lord comes to Nathan, and the word he carries back to the king in the morning is one of the gentlest reversals in all of Scripture. David will not build God a house. God is going to build David one. Not a house of cedar or stone, but a house of sons and daughters, a family line, a future stretching farther than any wall could ever stand. Tell my servant David, the word begins, and then it reaches all the way back to a hillside outside Bethlehem, to a boy with a staff in his hand. Now therefore, so shalt thou say unto my servant David, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. And I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Before a single word is spoken about the future, God simply retells David his own story. I took you, I was with you, every step of the way, from the sheepfold to the throne has been carried. And then the promise comes, spoken over a man who has begun to think about the end of his own days. And it is spoken tenderly, the way you might speak to someone drifting towards sleep. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. Even David's death is wrapped in soft words here. He will sleep with his fathers, the way a tired man lies down at the end of a full day, and while he rests, God will still be working, raising up a son, establishing a kingdom. And then comes the widest word of all, the one that outruns every calendar. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever, forever. David could not have seen how far that promise would travel. It would rest first on Solomon, the son who would one day build the temple of stone. But it kept going, down the long years, through kings good and kings poor, through exile and silence, until one quiet night in that same little town of Bethlehem, a child was born of David's line, great David's greater son, and in him the old promise found its forever, a throne that time cannot touch, a kingdom that will never end. The word spoken in a cedar chamber by candlelight holds still tonight over your own roof and your own rest. When Nathan finishes speaking, David does not call for builders, and he does not make speeches. He does one of the loveliest, quietest things any king ever did. Then went King David in and sat before the Lord, and he said, Who am I, O Lord God? And what is my house that thou hast brought me hitherto? He just sits, a king, with his crown left behind on the table, sitting before the ark of God, a man with nothing in his hands and nothing to offer but wonder. Who am I? It is not fear speaking, and it is not false modesty. It is what the heart says when a gift arrives that is far too large ever to repay. And as he sits there, his prayer slowly settles, the way water settles when the wind dies down, out of amazement and into a deep, restful trust. And now, O Lord God, thou art that God, and thy words be true, and thou hast promised this goodness unto thy servant. Therefore now let it please thee to bless the house of thy servant, that it may continue forever before thee. For thou, O Lord God, hast spoken it, and with thy blessing let the house of thy servant be blessed forever. Thou hast spoken it. That is where David lets the whole weight of it rest, not on his own strength, not on the faithfulness of his sons, not on the walls of any house that human hands could raise, but on the simple fact that God has said so. He asked to give God a gift, and instead he received one, and perhaps that is the way it usually goes. The best of God's gifts are rarely the things we manage to build for Him. They are the things He quietly builds for us, while we sleep, while we wait, while we sit before Him with empty hands. And you may sit before the Lord that same way tonight, right where you are, in the dark, with the day behind you. You do not need words worthy of the moment. David did not have them either. You may simply rest in what has been spoken over you, goodness and mercy, a place prepared, a keeping that does not depend on you. Empty hands are welcome there. A quiet heart is enough. In the chamber the candle has burned low, and the flame leans and rights itself, small and steady, and its warm light touches the crown on the table and the open scroll beside it. The king's eyes are closing. Somewhere beyond his own days, beyond his own strength, a house is being built for him that he will never have to defend, resting on a word that will never be broken. And so David sleeps, at peace with a promise larger than his life, and the city rests around him, and the night keeps watch. And you may rest here too, held in the same faithful keeping, until sleep comes soft and slow. The lamp is still burning, and the page is still open, and the King we have been walking beside is still there in his house of cedar, at rest in a promise that could not be broken. Let the story carry you a little further now, slowly, the way a river carries a leaf. For the scriptures are honest in a way that few books are honest, and they do not hide the failings of the people God loved. There is a strange and tender comfort in that. Even a man after God's own heart could lose his way for a season, and the Bible tells us so quietly and without flinching, so that no one who has ever lost their own way would think themselves beyond the reach of mercy. It happened in a season when the king stayed home from where he should have been. The armies had gone out in the spring, as armies did, but David remained behind in Jerusalem, restless on his rooftop in the evening air. And there a glance became a wanting, and the wanting became a taking. And then, because one hidden thing so often asks for another, there came a hiding that cost a faithful man his life. We do not need to linger over it. The story is told in Scripture with sorrow, not with relish, and we will tell it the same way. The king who had been so open before the Lord grew quiet and closed, and for many months he carried his secret the way a man carries a stone inside his chest, and the Psalms went silent in him. But God did not leave him there. He sent the prophet Nathan, and Nathan did not come shouting. He came with a little story, told gently, the way you might tell a story at bedtime. There were two men in a city, he said, one rich and one poor. The rich man had flocks and herds past counting. The poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb that he had raised in his own house. It ate from his plate and drank from his cup and lay in his arms at night, and it was like a daughter to him. And when a traveler came to the rich man's door, the rich man spared his own abundant flocks and took the poor man's one lamb instead. David's anger rose hot at the injustice of it. as any good shepherds would. And then Nathan looked at his king with what must have been great sadness and great love, and told him softly that the rich man in the story was David himself. No thunder fell, no walls shook, only a heart broke open, which is what God had been waiting for all along. David did not argue, and he did not excuse himself. He said simply that he had sinned against the Lord, and out of that broken place rose a prayer that wounded souls have been praying ever since, the 51st Psalm, the psalm of a man with nowhere left to hide and no wish to hide any longer. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. Hear how he goes straight to mercy, not to bargaining. He does not offer God his victories or his crown. He only asks to be washed, the way a child asks, trusting that the one who washes him is kind. And deeper into that same psalm, he prays for something no army could win and no king could command. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free spirit. He is not asking to be spared the consequences. He is asking to be near God again, because nearness was always the treasure, from the sheepfold to the throne. And he had learned there at the bottom what God truly wants from us. And it is not grand gestures. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. O God, thou wilt not despise. Let those words rest on you for a moment. A heart that comes home undefended is never turned away. David wrote afterward about the relief of it, the sheer lightness of a soul that has stopped pretending. Blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. That word blessed could almost be read as happy, the deep, quiet happiness of a debt that is gone. I acknowledge my sin unto thee, and mine iniquity have I not hid. I said, I will confess my transgressions unto the Lord, and thou forgavest the iniquity of my sin. Notice how quickly forgiveness follows confession there. In the very same breath, he confessed and God forgave, and between the two there was no long delay, no probation, no wringing of hands, only a door already open. And in his later years, David set down what he had come to know of God in his very bones, in the 103rd Psalm, words so gentle that many have fallen asleep inside them, as you may tonight. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and plenteous in mercy. He will not always chide, neither will he keep his anger forever. He hath not dealt with us after our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. Breathe slowly now, and let the next words be the whole night sky over your bed. For as the heaven is high above the earth, so great is his mercy toward them that fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. East and west never meet. However far you travel toward the sunrise, the sunset is still behind you. That is the distance God has put between you and everything you have ever confessed to Him. Like as a father pitieth his children, so the Lord pitieth them that fear Him. For He knoweth our frame, He remembereth that we are dust. He knows what we are made of. He remembers even when we forget how fragile we are. And He is gentle with us the way a father is gentle with a tired and stumbling child. So whatever you have carried into this room tonight, whatever old regret still visits you in the dark, you may set it down now beside the lamp. The God who forgave David keeps no ledger against those who come home to Him. He is not waiting to scold you. He is waiting to receive you, as He received a king who had fallen far and was welcomed all the way back. The page lies open on the table. The little flame stands steady in its warm gold halo, and the night around it is soft and deep and blue, sin covered, heart quiet. You can sleep now, washed and forgiven, held in a mercy higher than the heavens and wider than the east is from the west. And so the heart is quiet now, and the sin is covered, and the King is old. He sits in the hush of His last evenings, wrapped against the cool of the night, and the lamp beside Him burns low and steady, the way a life burns when almost all of it has been given. You may rest here with Him. Nothing more is asked of you tonight. The battles are long over. The running is done. There's only the stillness and the small gold light and the slow breathing of an old man remembering. And where does an old man's memory go? In the evening of his life, it goes home. It walks back down all the years, past the throne and the crown, past the palace and the wars, past the caves and the wilderness, all the way back to the beginning, to the night fields of Bethlehem, where a boy once lay among the sheep and looked up at the stars. The grass is cool there in his remembering. The flock breathes softly in the dark, and the song he made there as a boy comes back to him now, deeper than it was, slower than it was, proven now by a whole long life. He knows every word of it, the way you know the way to your own bed in the dark. For he had been a shepherd. He had spent his boyhood keeping sheep, watching over them, leading them, lying down among them under the wide night sky. And somewhere in those long, quiet hours, he understood the gentlest truth he would ever learn, the truth that held him all his days, that all along, while he was shepherding, he himself was being shepherded. He had a shepherd of his own, and out of that knowing came the song we call the 23rd Psalm. 6 small verses, the whole of a life gathered into them. And he says them now in the dark, slowly, the way you might say them with him. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That is where it begins, and in a way, that is the whole of it. The boy in the fields never lacked. There was bread enough, and wool against the cold, and stars for company, and the nearness of God like a warmth at his back. And the man never truly lacked either, not in the desert, not in the cave, not in the worst of his sorrow. because the shepherd was there. And where the shepherd is, the sheep have everything they need. You may let those words settle over you like a blanket drawn up to the chin. The Lord is your shepherd too. You shall not want. Whatever tomorrow holds, it will hold enough. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. The old king smiles a little at this, remembering. He had led his own flock to grass like that, soft valley grass, and to water that lay so calm it held the sky in it, because sheep will not drink from a rushing stream. They need water that is still, and he learned that his God led him the same way. Not driving, never driving, only leading gently to the places of rest. Now, at the end of his story, he is himself, lying down in the green pasture. He is beside the still water at last. And so are you, in your quiet room, in your own bed, in the dark. He maketh you to lie down. Rest is not something you must achieve tonight. It is something you are given. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. He could not have sung that line as a boy the way he sings it now. Now he knows what it costs and what it means. He had fallen and fallen far, and his soul had been broken in his own hands, and God restored it, not because he deserved it, but for his name's sake, because that is who God is, because mercy is his nature, the way warmth is the nature of this small flame. Perhaps your soul has been weary too. Perhaps it has been broken in places no one else has seen. Hear the old man say it softly in the dark. He restoreth my soul. He restores yours as well, quietly, gently, even while you sleep. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. He does not tremble when he says this. He says it the way a man speaks of a road he has already traveled. He had walked so many valleys. The valley of Elah, where a boy stood small before a giant and was not alone. The wilderness of En-gedi, where he hid in the caves and learned that the dark itself can be a shelter. The valley of grief, when his heart broke over his children. The valley of guilt, deeper than all the rest. And in every one of them, every single one, God was there, not watching from a distance. There, thou art with me. And now, one more valley waits for the old king, the last and quietest one, and he is not afraid of it, because he knows by now, knows in his bones, that there is no valley his shepherd does not walk. The rod that once drove off the lion, the staff that drew the wandering lamb gently home, they are with him still. They are with you still. You may close your eyes on that. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. How many years the enemies pressed him. A spear in the king's hall, armies at the borders, sorrow inside his own house, and yet in the very middle of it all, there was always a table, always bread, always a place set for him, calm as this lamp, as if the trouble at the edges of his life could never quite reach the center of it. and the oil. He remembers the day it first ran down over his boyhood hair, warm and slow, in front of his brothers, when God chose the youngest and the least. All his life that anointing held. All his life the cup filled and filled and spilled over the brim. Count nothing tonight but the overflow. Your cup too has held more than you ever poured into it. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Surely, not perhaps, not on the good days only. Surely, he looks back down the whole length of his life, the fields and the giant, the caves and the crown, the sin and the covering mercy, and he sees them there, walking behind him the whole way, like two faithful shepherds following one sheep. Goodness and mercy. They followed him through everything. They followed him home. And now home is very near, and it does not frighten him at all, because home is not a dark place. It is the house of the Lord, and no one who dwells there for a night only. It is forever. The song is finished. The old king's eyes are closed now, and his breathing is slow and even, and the lamp burns on beside the open page. The words remain in the room after the voice has gone quiet, the way warmth remains after the sun has set. The Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want. You are lying down now in the green pasture. The waters are still. The room is still. Everything at last is still. The room is still. The lamp on the sill has burned itself down to a small and steady gold, and beyond the stone window, the deep blue of the night has begun, very slowly, to soften at its edges. You do not need to open your eyes to know this. It is enough that the light knows. The shepherd's psalm has been said, every word of it, and it has settled over the room the way a blanket settles, and nothing more is asked of you now. There's only one more thing to tell, and it is the gentlest part of the whole story. It is the evening of a life. David is old now. The boy who ran across the pasture with a sling at his belt has become a man of many winters, and the man has become a grandfather, white-haired, slow-moving, warm in his bed while a lamp burns low beside him. The wars are over. The running is over. The caves and the deserts and the long nights of hiding are so far behind him that they have turned into songs, and the songs are sung by other voices now in the quiet of the courts, by people who were not yet born when he first sang them. And near the end, the old king spoke one more song, and those who loved him wrote it down and called it his last words. It was not a song of battles. It was a song about mourning. He said that God had spoken to him, quietly, the way God had always spoken to him. And he told it this way. The God of Israel said, "The Rock of Israel spake to me. He that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God." And then, as if he could already see it through some window of his own, he described what such a life is like, and perhaps what the mercy of God had been like over all his years. And he shall be as the light of the morning when the sun riseth, even a morning without clouds, as the tender grass springing out of the earth by clear shining after rain. That was the last picture the old shepherd left us. Not a throne, not a crown, early light and clean air and wet grass shining after a night of rain. The world washed and new. If you have ever stood at a window at first light after rain has fallen all night, then you have seen what David saw at the end, and it was good. There was a son to speak to before he slept. The record tells it simply and kindly. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong therefore, and show thyself a man. And the rest of the charge was gentler still, spoken in the words an old father uses. Walk close with your God, keep his ways, love what he loves, and you will be kept, my son, as I was kept. It was an old man passing a lamp into younger hands, steadying the young fingers around it, making sure the flame did not so much as flicker in the passing. And then the story closes his chapter the way you would close a beloved book, slowly, with your hand resting flat upon the cover. And he died in a good old age, full of days, riches, and honor. And Solomon, his son, reigned in his stead. Full of days. What a gentle way to say it. Not 1 year missing, not one night unaccounted for. And the old language says it most gently of all, that he slept with his fathers, as if dying, for a man so long kept, were only one more lying down. A life that began in a sheepfold, among the warm and breathing flock, ended in honor, in a bed, in peace, with his son upon the throne, and his songs already on their long way to you. Somewhere in his later years, the old man had written down what a whole lifetime had taught him, and it reads like a testimony given quietly beside a fire. I have been young, and now am old, yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. He had looked back down the whole road, the pasture, the giant, the caves, the crown, the grief, the mercy, and in all that long looking, he could not find a single place where God had let go of him. Not one. Perhaps you have lived long enough to say something like that yourself. Perhaps tonight, half asleep, you already know that it is true. And through all of it, in caves and palaces alike, he had learned one small skill that turned out to be the greatest of them all. He had learned how to fall asleep in the keeping of God. He said it once with plain wonder, remembering a night when sleep should have been impossible. I laid me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me. Lying down was his act of trust. Waking was God's quiet answer. And between the two, there was nothing for him to do at all. And that was the whole secret. And once, at the close of an evening psalm, he gathered his entire life into one bedtime sentence, and it may be the softest sentence in all his songs. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. That is the whole story, really. The lion and the bear, the brook and the giant, the cave and the crown, all of it folded down into one line that an old man could whisper into his pillow. He is the one who keeps, so I will be the one who sleeps. From the pasture to the last morning, not one of his nights went unkept. You may count them if you like, drowsily, without counting at all, the way you would run a hand along a shelf of old books. Nights under the stars with the sheep breathing near, nights in the cave with the lamp hidden low, nights in the palace with grief waiting at the door. Every one of them held, every one of them followed by a morning. And the same keeping that was over him is over you now, in this room, in this bed, this very night. The lamp on the sill is very low now, a small gold breath of light, and the window has begun to pale, the deep blue giving way at the rim of the sky, the way it does just before the earliest morning. You do not need to watch for it. Morning knows how to arrive without your help. Let the story rest now, finished and warm. Let the old king rest, full of days. And you, beloved, lay yourself down in peace, and let sleep come, for the one who kept every night of that long life is keeping this one, and you are safe, and you may rest. So the story comes to rest, and so may you. A shepherd boy with a harp on a quiet hillside, a young man standing unafraid before a giant, a fugitive singing psalms in the dark of a cave, sparing the life of the very king who hunted him, a man after God's own heart, who fell and wept and was forgiven, and at the end of it all, an old man warm in his own bed, full of days, asleep in peace. It is all one story, and it is a story of a God who keeps. The same keeping that followed David from the pasture to the throne now settles gently over your house, over your doors and your windows, over the ones you love, and over the ones you are still praying for. So you do not have to hold the night together. Someone stronger is holding it already. The songs of Israel say it plainly. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. While you rest, he watches. While you forget, he remembers. The lamp may burn low on the sill, and the sky may stay dark a while longer, but his eyes do not close, and they will not close all night. So, lay it all down now. The worries you carried into this room, the ones you meant to solve before morning, let them go into hands that never tire. The old words are true. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Sleep is not something you must earn tonight. It is something he gives, and you are his beloved. If these stories bring you peace, Solace Scriptures is also on Spotify, ready whenever the night is long. And if this journey with David has blessed you, leave a candle lit in the comments, so another weary soul may find this quiet room. Now receive the blessing the priests of Israel spoke over the people, the same blessing that covered David and his fathers before him, and all who have ever slept beneath these promises. Let it cover you. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Good night.